So you are at the right webinar if you were coming to understand more about behaviour management and mental health. And we are delighted here at Education Support to have a fantastic panel to talk to you today. Those of you who've been to any of these series of webinars before know that rather than wheeling in kind of experts who have written about stuff and who were once practitioners, we tend to try and involve people who are right now working on the topics that we are talking about. And I'm delighted to say that that's exactly who we've got in the room today. My name is Sinead McBurdy. For anyone I haven't met, I'm the Chief Executive of Education Support, and I'm your chair for the day. But the far more interesting members of this panel are the behaviour trainer, Athir Hassan. Athir is a teacher, an author, and a behaviour management coach. He has taught at university as well as at high school, and he's led departments, mentored trainees, delivered training, the whole shebang. And he also has quite a big following on social media. So he is a man who has a lot to say around behaviour, and we'll welcome his thoughts on that. I'm delighted to welcome Danny Compton from the Wirral, Danny's an English lecturer at a sixth form college, but she has also taught in secondary. She leads the team there in digital learning and is a mental health champion with Place to Be. And so she will bring us that kind of frontline experience that she has in the FE college that she's working in. And then delighted also to welcome Jen Catling. So Jen's a low intensity cognitive behavioral interventionist practitioner, and she can tell us more about what that means. For anyone who goes, could you say that again more slowly? She can advise us of any further information. But she's specializing in her work with children and young people. She works in Brighton and Hove Community Mental Health Services. And in that role, she's supporting children and young people who have mild to moderate mental health needs. And of course, in that role, you can imagine she's working with educational staff all the time. As well as that, she also works with Anxiety UK. So Jen's going to bring us the insight that she's got from that work that she does with many of the children and young people who often end up in the behaviour system would be the same kids who Jen's encountering through her work on the mental health side. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. And let me just say, this webinar is for you. So if there are questions and conversations and topics that you're particularly keen to hear about, then please post that in the chat. You can either do that so everyone can see it, or you can do it directly to me. And if you write to me privately on a private message, I will keep the question anonymous. So there's no, if you don't feel that you need to reveal too much about who you are or where you are. Let's kick off. Danny, I'm going to turn to you first. So this whole topic of pupil behaviour, how does pupil behaviour affect educators in your experience? Like, surely this is just part of the job, or is it?
I mean, obviously it is part of the job, and I think it's one of the things that become the biggest part of the job sometimes. Certainly in the education like facilities I've worked in across secondary and further education, coming up against behaviour, I think if it's not solid and you don't really know who to turn to for help and things like that, or how to manage things, I think you can easily take it personally, and it can easily become really overwhelming for you. As a teacher, like, I remember I worked in quite a deprived area in my first year of teaching as an NQT, and the support just wasn't in place, and it felt like the school was like overrun in a lot of things, and a lot of the teachers were really stressed, really burnt out, because nobody really knew how we were supposed to manage like the students' behaviour, because so many of the staff were really young, and you know, we didn't have that experience. And so it was really, really tricky. So it's something I've been quite passionate about learning, you know, like myself, and I'm bettering myself as a teacher, because those first couple of years was such a struggle, managing to, you know, like sort of do any research I could on like behaviour management, how I react to behaviour as well was a massive thing, because I think I was taking the lead from like senior teachers in my first school. And I don't think their approach was necessarily always the correct way to do it. For example, I'm really sort of like against raising my voice a lot of the time now, like unless it's an absolute emergency in the classroom. I think for me, I sort of try and project how I want the students to act. So I try and stay as calm as I can, speaking in like a really respectful way. Again, it's modeling all that sort of stuff for your learners as well, because otherwise it can become all consuming. I think with behaviour, I try and sort of nail it in the first couple of weeks, you know, like when I'm meeting new classes, like at the moment, that's what I'm currently focusing on, like making sure behaviour's the way I want it and it's excellent, it's secure. And then, you know, like everything else, my curriculum and stuff just can fall into place around it. And then that can be what I focus on properly for the rest of the year. So I think it's really important to get it right in the first couple of weeks, which again is why it's good, I suppose, to attend this seminar like early on in September rather than like doing it at the end of the year.
Lovely. There's a number of things I want to pick up in that. But I'm just gonna, Athir, I'm gonna just check in with you on that, because what Danny's saying in terms of getting it right at the beginning and just putting some stuff into practice right up front, I know that you've got a lot to say around that, but if you had to give a kind of a short list of the things that you think are most important to get right, specific things that you're doing at the beginning of the year, what are those kinds of things?
Yeah, you know, I was just listening to Danny and she's absolutely right. I mean, for me, the foundation to any learning that can take place in a classroom has to be a strong, good classroom management of the class. And that's the foundation. And I've seen that and it works all the time. But just to answer your question with regards to tips and things to get it right is the first lesson. The first lesson you see a class is the key to everything, because that is when they see you for the first time. And that's when you actually implement the strategies that need to work. Now, I always start outside the classroom. I start right outside where I have the class in line. And that is when I actually start talking about what I expect them to do inside the class. I treat my classroom like it's my home. So I actually say to them, look, when you come inside the room, you know, this is the home. You need to look after it. You need to, and then I'll go through all the specific strategies. I might take a lesson to do it. But you see, that lesson is so important because it sets the tone for the rest of the term, the year, or however long you're teaching that cohort, that group. I can't emphasize it enough. That first lesson is the absolute key. But the thing is, you need to obviously get the right strategies to actually go through for that first lesson. So like I said, I'll start from outside. I'll actually start with small things from the uniform. How do you look? You need to look right. You need to speak right. And I'll do the same. You know, pleases and thank yous, communication is key. So I'll actually go through a whole list of things, but not too many things, because I think if you have too many strategies, you could lose them along the way. So stick to a few key things that you think you would like to have in order for the class to work and the strategies to work in your environment. So they would come inside. I have a big thing about respect. So I'd actually talk to them about how we treat each other, how we speak to each other, how we behave, how we move around the classroom. There's a lot of things with that actually help them settle. And I have the line outside the class every single lesson, not just the first lesson, because I want them to come in calmly. So I'll say, leave the baggage from the last classroom, come to my room, come calm, come ready, and that so that you're ready to take in my learning inside my room. You're not going to run in. No one runs in the classroom. Just wait outside calmly, and I'll bring you in quickly, and then we can start to progress. And really, that's what it is. And I'm very calm. I never shout, and I don't believe in shouting. I believe in having a calm voice because I want them to replicate what I do. So respect, please, thank you, calm voice. How do we look? We look great. Monitors around the classroom, give them responsibilities. Hands up if you have a question, and then I'll come and see you straight away. I'm there for you. I'm here for you. I believe we can do well. Let's progress. Let's get the work on the board. VAK, you know, just quick, but, you know, very clear. I have to be very clear with the students, and that's the key. Clarity and fair. You have to be fair. So if something happens, listen to them. If you don't listen to a student, they might react negatively. So I believe listening is one of the really most important things as well. Listen to your students.
Lovely. I like the clear and fair. Kids have a great sense of fairness in my experience. I know as a parent, I get hauled over the coals if I'm seen as in any way unfair. Danny, I'm going to come back to you in a minute around, because that's lovely hearing from you and Athea about the sorts of things that you do to get it right up front. But I want to come back and talk about what's the impact for teachers when it doesn't kick off on the right footing, when for whatever reason it's just not been a great start to that relationship and that foundation isn't in place. Just to, because I think sometimes people feel that maybe it's just them that has the experience of that. So I want to just have a chat about what we know about teachers in that situation where it's not going well. But first of all, Jen, I want to come to you. I was really struck there when Danny was talking. She was reflecting on herself in relation to behavior. And she said one of the things she thought about was, how do I react to certain behavior types? How important are we ourselves and our own kind of personalities and experience? How important is that? Or is it just, actually, you know what, you do A, B, and C, and that's it. It works every time.
Oh, I think it's so important. We have to know what's going on ourselves and with ourselves, and when we're triggered by things, and what's important to us, I suppose, as professionals. So I'm hearing a lot and noticing a lot of teachers are under a lot of pressure at the moment. And, especially coming back from lockdowns and things like that, where students or pupils were used to just doing their own thing and learning in their own way at home, and then they're suddenly coming back into the classroom, and teachers have a very big responsibility to manage that behavior, and that's probably lots of different reasons for that behavior. It could be mental health difficulties that pupils have, but I think we also have to be aware of our own mental health difficulties in these difficult times, and the things that can trigger off our own anxieties, our own stress responses, even low mood and burnout. And I think being aware of the signs of burnout, like feeling unmotivated, feeling drained, maybe feeling low and depressed, or feeling very stressed and very anxious about things, and feeling not able to command the room perhaps, or to put in those boundaries that need to be put in place in order to have that kind of environment that Athea was talking about. I feel like Athea was really talking a lot about boundaries and role modeling, and we can't do that unless we're really able to take notice of what's going on for us, accepting any emotions that we're going through. It's really normal to feel anxious and stressed in certain situations, or maybe even all the time at the moment, in terms of the way things can be at school, with challenging behavior and all the different responsibilities that come with that. And I think, it's important to accept our own, that we're not perfect, and we're not going to be able to get everything right and be absolutely fine and happy all the time. We have to sort of take care of ourselves in that way. So being compassionate to ourselves, just the basic stuff like not giving ourselves a hard time, and talking to ourselves in the way that we would talk maybe to a pupil who's having a hard time and is stressed. I think that's it's different for everyone. Self-care is different for everyone, but I think it's just having that inquiry, being curious about what's going on for me right now, and why might this be particularly difficult for me. Do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to work out what my boundaries are and what I need to ask of my pupils, either individually or as a collective? And what do I need? How do I get that, whether that's within the classroom, in terms of relationships with the pupils, or is it outside of the classroom with other staff, with colleagues, or even at home? Who can teachers and education staff reach out to formally or informally at school, outside of school?
Well, and that's a particular topic we're going to come back to a little bit later. I think what you're saying there that really strikes me is when you're talking about how we talk to ourselves, and do we talk to ourselves with the same respect that Athea might require his students in his class to talk to him? I think often we can be far harsher on ourselves, but also that bit about knowing yourself. I know my teaching experience is only at university, which is different, and the class dynamics are different, but I know that if, when I was teaching, if I had a day where I just, for whatever reason, wasn't feeling fantastic, I learned very quickly that structuring group work was going to work much better than me being at the front, or just commanding and holding a conversation. It would never be the same kind of interesting and engaging mode if I was basically half powered, where I could set them to do stuff in groups, and they didn't notice so much that I was only half of me there in the room. And I think we'll all have our own strategies like that, how we manage, but you can't do that if you haven't noticed that you're having a day that's a less great day than yesterday was. Danny and Athir, I want to come back to this point around, so we know that there's a key relationship here between those of us who are teaching and the children and young people who are being taught. And we know that setting it up on the right foot is exactly the right thing. But what happens if I haven't set it up on the right foot, if I'm working in the kind of environment that Danny talked about, where there is no clarity. Actually, it's not clear what I should be doing in behavior terms. There's no consistency. There's not really an awful lot of support from senior leaders. If I end up in that situation, then I think it's very easy for me to feel like I'm somehow to blame and I'm somehow a failure. Does that resonate? Do you think that does happen for people, or how do you think people are responding in those situations? Danny, do you want to come in there?
I was wondering, I was like, yeah, so I think that did happen to me as well, especially because in the sort of setting I was talking about earlier as well, when I first started, I was a cover supervisor for like the first, I think like the first half term, and then I was taken on as a full-time teacher, so I had like quite a really harsh like start to teaching, because a lot of the students saw me as a cover supervisor, even though I'd made that transition to a teacher, and they were like, no, we're not learning from you, and I'm just really weren't into it. And so in like that first year, I had to sort of try really hard to, like get them to forget about that and like see me as like, like their serious teacher. And I think some of the things that I had to try with the most, and it, it doesn't happen overnight. This takes months. Like, I think people think like, oh, well, I'll try this one technique for this week, and then it doesn't work, so they stop doing it. Because they're like, well, it's obviously not working. But it takes ages and ages and ages. Like, you've really got to like keep going with the stuff. And the sort of things for me, I've just been writing some things down as I was thinking, but like my planning, like I realized had to be like really tight and solid. So like when you were saying then, like you sort of found like the group work works better for you, it's knowing your classes as well, and knowing like, right, this kind of a task will work for, like my English class in the morning, but it's definitely not going to work for like my year 8s in the afternoon. They need to do something else, like something where, like either like getting them up, or like they need to be actually like solitary the whole time, like that sort of thing. So really being strict with your planning. And I always used to say, like, because I'm mentor now, so I would say I plan with the seconds, like I know what they're doing every part of the lesson, and there's always way too much like in my lesson, because I'd rather be over planned than have any kind of dead time in my lesson, because it's where when you get dead time in your lesson, that's when like there's opportunities like that to happen as well. So it's kind of making your planning effective, making it, like inclusive for all your students as well. Like, can all your students access it? Is that a reason why some of them are misbehaving? Because they maybe don't understand it, it's not differentiated, like to their sort of needs. A new thing we've just started, so last week we had like our induction week for all of our students, and they like filled out a little questionnaire, like little Microsoft forms, and it was very much like, it wasn't based on anything academic, it was just stuff about them that they wanted us to know, anything like any problems that they might want us to know, things like that. And some of the responses, because I was reading through them today, were really interesting, because it was stuff that I might not necessarily know otherwise. It was like, I feel actually really anxious about being in English, because the students I teach as well are all resitting. So they're resitting their English GCSE. So lots of them have got really low confidence, which is another reason why they might be like acting out and stuff like that. So that was really like a really good thing. Like today when I was reading through, I've made notes on like all my students, and it's going to give me a really good insight. And some of them have even said like, oh, I really benefit if you have like this certain font, on the board. I thought I would never, like I just wouldn't know. And it's little things like that that make the lesson a lot more accessible for them, that hopefully will help build that. So I'd say planning's a massive one for me.
I can imagine. And Athir, if there's somebody sitting in this room who's thinking, Athir and Danny sound like they've really nailed all this stuff and they know just what to do, but I don't, and it just means that I'm ... whatever it is they think about themselves.
Listen,
Are they on their own there? What, I mean, talk to me about those feelings.
no, they're not on their own. And, you know, we all start from that place. I mean, I remember when I did my teacher training, I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. And sometimes, to be honest, I didn't feel like the training was there or the support was there, even at that time. And that's the strange thing. There's so much work to do with this. We need way more support earlier on in the early years, in the training time period, because it wasn't there for me. And I remember I was having sleepless nights when I was training. I was trying to figure out how to do strategies to make the class listen to me at the beginning, because I didn't know. There was nowhere I could go for support because no one could help me and no one was helping me. So actually, I felt like I was going to leave the profession in my training year. I was actually going to leave, but I stopped myself because I started to find out that what I was writing down and my feedback to myself after the lesson was working slowly. And that's the key thing. Slowly, what Danny said, it takes time, and it does take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But the problem in schools is we don't have patience. There's no patience anymore. They want you to nail it from lesson 1. Yeah. And then they'll come in and have a look at the class. Oh, is it working? No. And then what happens is then they'll kind of watch you and start looking and seeing how you're doing and monitoring. And then that adds a bit more pressure if you don't get it right the first time. But the thing is, nobody gets it right the first time. Nobody does. It's a case of you build your strategies over time. It's just how it works. And so it's a hand-in-hand thing. Patience we need, and support. The support is, unfortunately, it's not fully there. We need way more support, especially in those early times that a teacher comes into a school training for the first time. We're losing teachers along the way because, and then some of the teachers are not saying anything. They're not talking. They're not saying it's this issue because they feel guilty. They feel like they should be getting this right, but really they don't have to get it right. They shouldn't have to. But yet there's this stigma, where they feel like they should get it right, but they're so afraid not to say anything because they don't want to feel like a failure or look like a failure. And then they kind of leave quietly. They might leave the profession, leave the school. You know, we've got a massive shortage, and yet we're not recruiting properly. We don't have the patience when they come in, and we don't give them the right support. Honestly.
I think there's a really important point here as well for established teachers who sometimes I talk to and they're having a really rough time with behavior. And there's a feeling for them that, gosh, you know, I've been doing this for years and I'm stuck with this, you know, year 9 science, whatever, is just it's gone pear-shaped. And that's a bad feeling because people think, well, I'm a professional, I've been doing this for years. But actually that happens too, doesn't it? It's not just people who are learning. You can be a well-established teacher and just have a bad run or end up in a situation for whatever reason. You're in a new school, there's a new form group, it doesn't matter. There's loads of things that trigger it, but that's not uncommon, right?
Absolutely. It's not uncommon and it's quite normal.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this is where the teacher has to, you know, kind of remember that, you know, I'm not a failure. It can happen anywhere. I could go to another school and the lesson will be terrible. Yeah. Because you have to acclimatize, you have to get it right for that. Every school is different. It has its own culture, its own way. So you have to adapt. So an experienced teacher absolutely will not get it right the first time. But it's not on them. Yeah. The key thing is it's not their fault and it's not on them, and it shouldn't be. And it should be the case of the leaders in the school should remind them of that and make sure that they feel at ease and not to feel like, you know, they got it wrong, because this is the issue. It's about the school making sure they feel like that the new teacher, you know, is fine and they'll be okay and they'll just get better over time, which they will.
And actually, that's one of the things, it's one of the reasons we wanted to have these webinar formats in place, because sometimes you might be in a school where it's not discussable and it's like, well, you're an established teacher, yada, yada, you shouldn't be having this issue. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we wanted to put a platform like this in place so that people can hear from others and the sorts of issues that people are experiencing. So I think that's a point I particularly want to land. Panelists, I'm just going to draw your attention to, there's a great question from Jackie in the chat. I'm going to ask you to have a think about that. But Jen, and maybe there's a segue here, but I was going to ask you, Jen, a little bit about if we know that staff, and I guess I'm turning to you because you're working in the system and yet you're at a bit of a remove. So it gives you a really interesting lens, I think, to see what's going on. If we've got staff working in our schools and colleges who are, for whatever reason, finding this difficult. They are in behavior hell, to the name of this webinar seminar, and they're not feeling good about it. What can they do to deal with that emotional impact that's there for them? How can they be dealing with that for themselves? Like, even never mind coming back to behavior management strategies, but how do you deal with just the impact that has on them?
I think that is probably a very, very big question, and there's probably a very big answer to that. I'll try and come up with something that's concise, but I think the reason for that is that everybody has a different kind of need in terms of the support they might need if they're struggling. I think, going back to my point before, I think first of all, you need to notice it. You need to notice that you're not doing okay. And what exactly is it? What's the reason for that? Is it burnout? Is it that, just really feeling very stressed and you're not managing that stress very effectively? I think, generally in terms of managing stress, I think it's important to reach out to others, talk about it, really just be a bit vulnerable, actually, maybe with colleagues, and say, yeah, I'm really struggling. And I think it goes back to the point the other panelists were making about, being able to kind of say that, and you shouldn't be expected to be perfect and be like this robot with no emotions and able to just power on through. And sometimes that's enough to get a bit, be heard, get a bit of support from colleagues or friends or family. But sometimes you might need to get professional support, and reach out to, local services, to your GP if you're really struggling. From a CBT point of view, and you did ask me to sort of give a little bit of an explanation of what that is. CBT is basically about the link between thoughts, emotions, and what we do to try and cope with those thoughts and emotions. And sometimes we can get trapped in our own cycles. So we can try to cope with a difficult emotion like anxiety, stress, low mood, or difficult thoughts, negative thoughts perhaps about ourselves, or unhelpful conclusions that we've made about things that are going on. And that can sort of, get us caught in a cycle in terms of the things that we do are then maybe a little bit helpful in the short term, in terms of dealing with that. So maybe sending a child out of the class, but actually in the long term, it can be not so helpful. So, thinking about what exactly is it that the problem is, and how can I address this sort of long term. So with stress, often it can be, can be to do with our thinking, that can be, or anxiety, it can be to do with our thinking and our understanding of situations not being quite right. It might be a bit skewed towards, it's all my fault, it's something I'm doing wrong, I should be able to do this, I'm rubbish, I'm a bad teacher, for example. Or it could be even, the people in the class, they don't respect me, or they have no respect, or they're just badly behaved and that's just how they are. But often with this kind of difficult behavior, and it was mentioned in the comment there in the chat, it can be to do with things like ASC, autistic spectrum condition, or ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for anyone who doesn't know. And it's it can be extremely disruptive, and it can be really, really a barrier in terms of working with young people. So often it's just about understanding maybe what not only what are my needs and how do I get those addressed, but also what are the needs of the individuals in the classroom. And it should be a team effort. It should be not just the teacher who's having to deal with that, but team working with the parents, with other staff at the school, like the SENCO, pastoral support, educational psychologists if they're available. I know that can be quite difficult to get their input sometimes. And then just thinking about the ways that, how am I trying to cope with it that may not be actually addressing the problem long term. Both in terms of looking after yourself, in terms of the difficulties you might be having, but also in terms of the problem as it's arising. It's always good to get advice on that, I think.
Thanks a million, Jan. Danny, in your GCSE resits, for example, or any other class, have you had an issue like this with sort of persistent disruption in a class with one? And are there any strategies you found particularly helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I think the past, I always seem to have like a class where this is like a really big problem. And I had one last year, and it was only a class of 7 students. So when I saw them on my register, I was like, brilliant, 7 students. This is going to be a walk in the park. Amazing. Can't wait to teach them. Girls, they were all doing hair and beauty. I thought, excellent. And no, it wasn't. It didn't end out to be a walk in the park. It was lots of like needs in the class and things like that. And specifically, the reason why I thought of that is because of that question from Jackie with ADHD. And because I did have some students as well with those sort of learning needs. And I'd experienced that before, but I hadn't experienced it on the scale of like where I was really struggling to manage it as well. And so I was like, oh God. So, and once I'd like sort of exhausted all my usual, you know, like tricks that most teachers will have, that, you know, like their normal routines and stuff like that. And I thought, right, it's getting, you know, later and later in the year and nothing's still working, you know. And it was a student, it sounds like really, really similar to the student in here as well. Like, I did the same sort of thing. They had comfort breaks, they got like loads of attention off me, things like that. And so just nothing was working. And so I went and spoke to our inclusion team. So that's like our version of like a Senko and stuff like that. And got support from their sort of form tutor as well. And we had like a separate meeting with them. So it was just me, the students and the pastoral tutor and our Senko. And one of the parents as well was present, which was really good because it kind of was, you know, like we sat together, you know, like at a small table. It wasn't like, oh, I'm behind a desk and they're like away from me. We sat together, we had like pen and paper out, right? What's going to happen? What can we do to like help you in the lesson? There's nothing worse. I always think like just treat your students how if you were struggling, how would you want someone to support you? Because I've been through like the rigmarole of being like on a support plan and all that sort of stuff quite earlier on in my career, and I felt like I wasn't, you know, like heard and I wasn't being dealt with. And a lot of the time with your students, it'll be because they don't feel like they're being heard, like they're just being told like calm down and, you know, like minimizing their emotions. And, you know, obviously everyone's been a teenager, you are very emotional normally, even when you're a child. So it's just about sort of understanding that and giving them space to talk to you about how they feel as well and what's going to help them. Because at least if you've laid everything on the table and you've told them to come to you with ideas, you know, you've done absolutely everything, you know, like for that child. And I think some of the solutions we came up with last year where so this student used to like write in every time, because she used to do this thing as well where she'd just, anything that came to her head, she had to say it immediately. Even if it was a really, really good answer, it still disrupts the class. So, and obviously sometimes you want other students to answer as well. So I'd say I absolutely love your enthusiasm. She had a special, like her own little notebook that was separate from like anything else. And I was like, anything you want to say, write it down immediately when I'm circulating. Because the good thing of it being a smaller class was that I did have a bit more chance to circulate. I was like, when I'm circulating, I'll read through it. And I'll get to you. We can chat about it. And I just started doing that with her as well. And that worked really nicely. And also giving her jobs and stuff like that. Like, even though she was much older, because I teach 16 to 19, it still worked the same way it would when I was in secondary. So, you know, like if I had something I wanted given out, I'd give it to her. If I had, you know, like anything, like come do this on the board for me, she'd be there straight away. I always used to see her first lesson, so I'd purposely not do like the date and title, and she'd do it. And she used to, and it put her in a great mood because, you know, she loved like her handwriting and stuff like that. And so that was again really beneficial, and it helped me build a really nice relationship with her over time. So again, it's just getting to know them as well as you can, and hopefully getting support from, you know, like your senior leaders, from parents, things like that. But that took a really long time. And even once we'd had, you know, like all like those interventions, there still were lessons where I would be frustrated because it wasn't, again, working every single lesson, you know, beautifully, but it was massively improved. And, you know, again, it was just constantly going back to it and, you know, like quietly speaking to her, you know, like taking it to, not like embarrassing them in front of everyone in the class, you know, like having a quiet word, you know, like at some point during the lesson or after or before, you know, like, right, let's remember, you know, like, what did we speak about? Remember about your book, you know, all that sort of stuff. So just constantly reinforcing it and going over it and showering it with praise, you know, like, and things like that. So it did. Yeah, sorry, rambling.
No, there's loads of good stuff in that, because it's really striking. You know, you echo what Jen says around, you're not on your own. It should be a team approach to this, the collaboration that you describe, the positivity actually, and looking for the positives. And this is really hard, especially when we're frustrated, I think, sometimes by the persistent and just how relentless sometimes disruption can be. And I love the idea of write down what you want to say as an opportunity to actually articulate the stuff that's going on for the young person. So no, really, really rich. Athira, I want to ask you about Michaela's question here, which is sort of the group version of what Danny's just been talking about. So let's imagine that, you know, I know we said at the outset about all the foundations. Let's imagine we're partway through the year. For whatever reason, that foundation isn't strongly established, and you've got a year 7, year 8 group that is persistently disruptive en masse. And the kind of balance of power is a bit out of whack, maybe, and affecting the ability of the teacher to get done what they want to do. Where would you start coming in there? How would you sort of, if you wanted to turn over a new page tomorrow, where would you begin?
Well, if it's en masse, then obviously, first of all, I'll go through the strategies, lesson 1, let's say, and I'll go through my expectations. So I might say, okay, let's make sure the planners are on the desk, make sure you've got your equipment, so on, and go through the lesson. Now, I will not continue that lesson until we establish and get things right. So the lesson 1 is a bit like, they will try maybe things. So they might speak out without having their hand up, for example. But it's a reminder lesson. So the lesson 1 is a reminder lesson about the expectations. Now, let's say the lesson 1 was done, and then we come back again to lesson 2. And again, en masse, we're getting some more issues that are happening. Then again, I will have to go back to and revert to the lesson. Now, what I would try to do is establish who let's say, the students that are causing most of the issues. Because what I'll do is I'll start working with them then. I'll look at the cohort. Let's say if it's everybody, then I'll talk to everybody again. And I'll go through another range of strategies. Lesson 2. So on top of layer 1, I'll have a few more things that I'll go through. But the one thing I will not do is, you can't teach a class if there's going to be behavioral issues. So my point is this: I'm not going to continue or go through the lesson until I've established that there will be good behavior. It's as simple as that. Yep. So whether it be I speak to a few individuals that are causing maybe the most challenging behavior after school, I might have to do that after school. So I'll actually speak to them. And I'll go further. I will actually maybe speak to parents. Now, I'll do this very quickly. I won't wait till week 2 or week 3, because the sooner you can go through specific dealing with this, the better. Because you have to show that you mean business and it's important to you and that you want to teach the lesson. You don't want to deal with like the behavior thing. So talk to individuals, even if it's the whole class. If it's the whole class, then the whole class comes back and we go through this, because we don't want to waste a lot of learning time in the classroom during lesson time. So let's go through this, how we're going to be, how we're going to behave. Now, what they'll find is they'll see that you're serious. They'll see that, okay, sir is so serious, he's keeping us back and he's going to go through the rules again. Okay, layer 2, we need to talk to parents if they continue, if they persist, because sir's going to show how important it is to him. So the parents will come in with a meeting. I'm going to have a meeting separate with, separate students with their parents and go through the importance to work well in my class. That will be the 3rd layer. So what you're doing is you're showing, you're not letting anything go, because the key thing is do not let even the smallest misbehavior go. So if, for example, you've said, I would like it to be quiet for 10 minutes and do some quiet work, for example, then if you hear noise happening, that means you've let it go. So you need to make sure that that person who's making the noise, you've let them know. It could be quietly, go and approach them quietly. Remember, you're not embarrassing, you're not looking to embarrass anyone. You're looking to make sure they're just working quietly, respectfully say, I'm just a reminder, can you please make sure that you know, you're quiet as everyone else is. Because what happens is, if you let one go, then you will find that the rest will kind of pick up on it, and they'll think, okay, the teachers let that one go, we can talk as well. And then it will grow. And the thing is, the whole class will start misbehaving. And this is the issue. It's very important to kind of stop it by one or two at the beginning, or else the problem will grow 100%. It always does. So, That's really helpful, Athir. And I think what I hear in what you're describing there is just even though it might be a bit tedious for Michaela, the need to just hold those boundaries constant by repetition, not give an inch until it's become normalized in your classroom. And not to cede any ground around that. And I guess it just, to Danny's point, sometimes this takes a long time and it is a bit boring. But eventually you wear them down and you win. Thank you very much, Athir, for that. Jen, I wanted to ask you, just thinking about how sometimes, and even just thinking there, that example, you know, if Michaela's banging her head on a brick wall, trying to get these year 8s to just do what she wants them to do, we can get very exhausted. And we've seen teachers across the sector get exhausted, and that exhaustion sometimes leads to burnout. That's not always driven by behaviour, but often behaviour has some part to play in that. What can colleagues do? Thinking now, here we are in September. It's not yet dark at 5 o'clock. We'll take this as a good thing, but before long it will be. As we sit here in September and think about staying well and avoiding burnout, are there particular things that relate to behaviour that you think are important for people to hold in mind as they try and stay well through this academic year?
I think it was already touched on, I think possibly by Danny, is not to take it personally. If someone is misbehaving in the classroom, it's usually because something that's going on with them, and they're testing those boundaries and what they'll get away with. And often I think I don't think you need to kind of try to solve all the problems at once. It's just about you're trying to manage it in that moment. Your role as a professional there is to keep that boundary, keep a mutual respect between you. And I think I can tell, I think that a lot of teachers, they might go away and that they kind of might really think about it a lot, about what can I do, what can I do to solve this problem. And I think sometimes it's about, you know, really separating out the difference between what your role is as a teacher and what might be someone else's responsibility. So making sure that you're getting the support from other people to solve that problem, and then just letting go of it, like let go of whatever that is, maybe that's been troubling you, and taking some time for yourself and just remembering you're not just a teacher. You're not just not that's, you know, a teacher is an incredibly respectful profession and incredibly important and crucial in our society. I don't mean it like that, but I mean you're also more than a teacher. And you're also a person, and you need to go and have a life and have some downtime and switch off from it, in whatever way that you need to do that.
Yeah, lovely. Danny, I'm going to come to you with the question that Zoe's asked in the chat, but before I do that, Athir, I wanted to run one past you. So I've had a private question from an NQT who describes their first year in primary teaching. They've got a student in the class, a pupil who's ADHD and impulsive and often physically unkind to others. And this teacher is trying different strategies, but is struggling and actually now thinking, well, I don't know that I can do this, doubting their own ability as a teacher. What would you say to them?
Well, firstly, the doubting, they shouldn't doubt, because these things, as in, they happen all the time. And there are issues all the time. So you should never feel like, you know, you're not doing a good job. What you can do, though, is you can, first of all, try to find things that work. So what I would do is I'd first of all find as much information about the student from the school as possible, step one, so that you know what's happening there. Step two, find out with regards to the school, what support should be in place, because sometimes there should be maybe a support person inside the classroom. So you should find that out. also. That's the second thing. The third thing is find out from other teachers what works with this student, because sometimes a teacher down the corridor, they might be working really well with that student, and they might have a few strategies that works. And especially as an NQT, I think it's important to go around and just see what is working with certain cohorts of students. I think it's very important just to have a wander around, speak to teachers in the staff room, you know, what's working with you with so-and-so. I think that goes a long way. And, you know, the thing that Danny said, and that does work with a lot of challenging students with regards to giving them a responsibility. Giving them responsibility and praising. Praising goes a huge way. So have that inbuilt, you know, praising students, because sometimes students don't feel like they're doing well. So they're going from class to class and they might not feel like they're achieving or progressing, but having that praise and giving them the responsibility of giving out the books, for example, and collecting them back in or wherever it may be, can help a lot with students. Yeah. So yeah, there's a few things there that maybe they can work on firstly.
That's really helpful to hear. And I think in the primary school setting, the chances are you're an NQT, the person who asked the question, this child will have been taught by a colleague last year, so there will be some knowledge. I think also you're early in your career and you're talking about a child who is physically acting out. I think I would expect somebody in whoever is supporting you in whatever role in the school to want to be on top of that and to step in. That's one of the most difficult things to deal with at any point in your career, actually. And it is really reasonable for you to have support around that. I guarantee you, this is not about you as a teacher, I promise you. This is something that people find very difficult no matter what the situation. And I would go further and say, if you are not getting support from the school leadership, actually they are failing. You are not failing, they are failing you. And you must not take this on yourself, but just understand you're not in a great school if that's the case. And you need to find a better school that deserves you. But this is not about you as a teacher. You're in year 1 or year 2 of your, as a qualified teacher. So this is not on you. Please hold that and know that. Danny, you'll have seen Zoe's question there. About when it's all too much and when you're stuck in that rut and you're thinking I can't do this and I've got to leave. You've picked yourself up, you said earlier, from not being in a great space. What would you share?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, like in 2020, this is like why I believe so passionately in like education support as well. Because in 2020, I was in my 3rd year and I was having a really, really bad time. And I just signed myself off work. And I was the same. I was like, I'm leaving teaching. I was looking for like other jobs in the civil service. I was like, that's it. I've washed my hands of it. And then while I was off, I seen this job come up at the college where I am now. And I just thought, you know what, I'll give it one more go, like one more shot. And I got it during lockdown. And I'm so happy that I did, because it was like a totally different environment. And I've like managed to thrive, like where I am. So I'm really, really happy that I just, like you were saying just then, it was just like a change of environment. So just thought I'd pick that up off what you said then. But like to answer Zoe's question, sort of about not taking it personally, and is there any way to make yourself feel better and want to stay in the profession? I think speaking to other people is massive. And one of the other things that worked with me, because I was quite isolated from my department, and my department didn't really gel very well, and I didn't feel like there was really many people in school I could talk to. And so while we were off during the lockdown, I made like a teacher Instagram account, and the amount of support on there was incredible. And I did the same with Twitter, speaking to loads of people online, and it was just felt like, oh, this is what it feels like to have like a good department, like a department that get along and stuff, which I'm really, really lucky to have now, because that's what I have in work. I go to work every day and I love it because I like my team. I love who I work with. And that helps massively. I'd say seeking support as well, because I think with teachers, you tend to isolate yourself, and it is that you blame yourself. You're like, well, X, Y, and Z, they're not struggling with these students, it's just me, so it's obviously me, and sometimes you're a bit too embarrassed, you don't want to speak to people about, like that you're struggling. So again, go and seek support, whether that be from people in your school, teachers that you've never met before online, or like through charities like education support. Just go and seek it out, because the worst thing that's going to happen is it doesn't work, so you might as well go and try. As well, like just some like little things I've picked up on, things that sort of boost your mood naturally. So like I had a really rubbish day on Thursday just gone. It was my first lesson with loads of my classes, and the behaviour, again, I'm sort of at the start of the year, I'm setting all them expectations, and I'm in like the behaviour hell sort of section of the year. And so on Thursday, I was like, this is the worst day ever. It's been awful. And then the next day I went in, it was Friday. I'm in our department. We just do really nice things for each other on a Friday, like all the time. So we all like, we'll leave a post-it note on each other's desks, you know, like if someone's done something funny that week, or, you know, like you just want to thank them for whatever and stuff like that. And so that's a nice thing, you know, like to come into on a Friday morning, like a little surprise post-it note, because everyone has one in the department. Or like making your space, like I think before, I can't remember who said it now, but like making your classroom your own home and like treating it like it's your space. Like my classroom, like it's a bit ridiculous. Like I've got like a lamp in there, but like, you know, like I've got like a blanket, all kinds. Like my room does look like it's my bedroom almost. Like people laugh and joke at me, but it is like, it's my space. I've got like nice smellies in there, so my room smells really good. And the students always comment on it as well. I've got like twinkly lights everywhere, and they love it because I think when they come into my room, it feels like, it doesn't feel like it's a classroom. It doesn't feel dead sterile. It feels like a nice warm space, and it makes me feel nice when I'm in it. So like it sounds really silly, but like that's just,
but it makes you want to be there too. That's the thing, isn't it? And I think, Zoe, we take thousands of calls every year at Education Support. We've got qualified people who are really good at having conversations on the other end of the phone. So sometimes having a conversation can be really helpful. I'm not saying it's the solution for everybody, but really feel free. I know colleagues will post the telephone number. You're welcome to use it. It's free and it's available 24/7. Jen, you're going to have some thoughts on this question as well, I know.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to say that different things work for different people. I really liked what you shared, Danny. I think in terms of, you know, feeling stressed and anxious, it's important to know that sometimes we can go into fight or flight mode. You know, that's not just one of those buzzwords. It's actually a scientific thing. Our body goes into stress mode, and sometimes I think the temptation is to try to ignore it, push it away, and it might be that you can't let yourself kind of feel that fully in the moment for whatever reason. But I think it's important to, as much as you can, just breathe through those emotions, because when you sort of let them happen, they will tail off by themselves. So I think it's important to remember that, you know, that it's okay to kind of just let yourself go through these emotions, and mindfulness can really help with that, with picking up on feelings, picking up on those thoughts I was talking about before that might not be helping, and focusing on the positives. What's gone well this week? You know, what am I really grateful for? What are the really good things that I can think about this week that can help me to kind of feel like what I'm going to do next is a bit more coming from a powerful place. You know, this is what worked last week, this is what I'm going to do again. And I think as well that fight or flight that we go through, a really good channel for that can be exercise. So yeah, you know, doing something, whatever that might be, if it's a walk or if it's like, you know, doing I don't know, football or something, whatever you enjoy doing, or you've always wanted to try. I think that's always really a helpful thing to have a weekly outlet in that way as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jen. That's brilliant. I'm aware I've got to wind this up, and I thought we'd struggle for conversation, folks, and we really haven't. We haven't got through a quarter of the questions I've got here to talk about. But anyway, Athir, in the shortest answer possible, do you have a go-to classroom table strategy, bearing in mind this is from a year 3 teacher?
A go-to table strategy. What does that mean?
So like the classroom layout, do you get the kids facing forward? Do you put them on tables? Do you care?
Seating plans. So seating plans, yes, I definitely do. Every single class, I will seat it in a specific way. So what I'll do is I'll bring the class in and I'll get them to stand by the chairs. I would look at previously what has previous teachers done in terms of the seating and what's worked for them. So tip 1, see what's worked for anybody else. Okay. And then don't change what works. So if that works, keep it. Step 2 is have them sat down and look at the dynamic for the first lesson. Just have a look. First of all, see where you'd like them to sit and see if, does it work? If it doesn't work, don't keep it. Actually change it like straight away for the next lesson, and let the class know. Say, look, I'm going to move people around because, you know, I'd like everyone, just kind of let them know what's going on. Don't just kind of move them next lesson because they might feel like, you know, why is Sir moving me? So yeah, move it around quickly and just look at the dynamics, because look, every dynamic is different, and it works in a different way. And sometimes you can have great progress just because they're sat next to somebody else. It's amazing, and it's so true. So I definitely would do that. I'll find out maybe from other people and then quickly try out a few different seating plans, see what works very quickly.
Brilliant, brilliant, love it. Thank you very much for that, Athir. I think I'm going to end or not even come back to you for, well, I'm going to ask you one pearl of wisdom that you want to leave with these people. I want to just say to Zoe, the other thing, Zoe, is remember, you might not have had enough of the profession. You may have had enough of the school you're working in. Sometimes the school is the issue, not teaching. One point you want to leave people with, Danny, one thing you want them to take away.
I'd just say, don't take it personally, and never, leave thinking I've done a really bad job today. You've never done a bad job. You've always tried your hardest that day, and you can just, go back in tomorrow and try again and see if it works. Just start every day fresh. Don't keep yourself in the other end of the week.
Starting fresh, love it. Let it go, let yesterday go. Athir, Mr. Behaviour Trainer, what have you got for me?
Okay, very quickly, small wins. Take the small wins and just appreciate them, because look, no one's going to have a perfect day. As long as you've got something small and it's positive, take it. Go home. As soon as you go home, you leave the gates 3:30. Don't look back. And I'm talking about, don't look at the emails. Don't think about behavior. Don't look at class year 8, year 9. Don't look at anything. As in, do something you love at home. Netflix, hobbies, football, gym, whatever it is. Take your mind, distract yourself out of school, or you will burn out. So please do it.
Love it. Love that. The rest. Jen, what about you? What do you want people to take away?
I think be aware of your boundaries, and if you don't know what they are, it's a really difficult thing to work out. It's not an easy thing. But I think often behavioural issues in the class can be because they need boundaries, and they need that in a loving way. And I think Athir's really illustrates that really well. But we also need that, as professionals. Teachers are, just as much in need of, that as much as their pupils. So maybe we have more than we think in common.
Love it. I can't do much better than what's been said there, folks, in terms of wisdom. So I give you our panel and thank our panel for their fantastic insights. We're early in the year, people. Look after yourselves. If you're tired, stop working, because working when you're tired just means you end up more tired. In September, we should be trying to just keep that vibe of being a bit relaxed going for as long as is humanly possible. We'll hopefully see you again in another one of these webinars. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your questions and for sharing. It's been great. There will be a recording that's going to be shared by colleagues, and really you should leave now, because basically I'll keep blathering until you people leave the room. Well, I won't really, but thanks for coming. Take care.